And Pedja is originally from Serbia. He served as a president and executive director for youth at JASAS, which is a Serbian NGO fighting HIV/AIDS that started in 1994. And he was also the president of Serbia on the Move, which was a movement building from Belgrade as well. His MPH is from Harvard, MD from Belgrade University. He's an instructor at the Chan School of Public Health, and he's also one of the directors for the Cambridge Health Alliance Fellowship, which is how we got to meet him. Me, Sarah, and Abigail had the pleasure of doing the CHOF Fellowship, I guess about 2 years ago now, which was a really great way of us getting an idea of this realm of community organizing and being able to put this committee together and kind of kick things off from there. The charisma that Pedja kind of brought to all of those weekend classes that we had, I'll be honest, sometimes I would log in and I'll say, 4 hours of my weekend going to this. But honestly, it always turned out to be very fruitful. I always look back to my notes, recognizing that I was really learning things that I'd never really had so much kind of approach to in the past. So thank you so much for those times, Pedja, and thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'll pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Samim, and it's such a pleasure to be here because this has been one of my favorite groups from the Climate Health Organizing Fellowship. Like, we've been doing Climate Health Organizing Fellowship for 3 years now. The fourth is starting next year, and there are a few groups that kind of like stood out and grow, like, which is amazing. And by the way, Joan, like, if you're in Wisconsin, there's a group there that we need to put you in touch with Joel and other, which are amazing group.
That would be great.
But, yeah.
Pedja, before you continue, let me interrupt to tell everybody else about that very clever story that you wrote, I think, called The Rock. Is that right?
Yeah, the story of the rock. Yeah, that's right.
You might want to post that online. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, thank you. And we met in I think in DC.
Yes.
When we were doing medical societies kind of session. Anyway, so let me dive in. So the reason why I was called in is to talk about relationship building and kind of like why and how is it relevant for community organizing. And like Samim did a good job, like telling a little bit about my bio, but I wanted to give you a little story behind that bio. I grew up in Yugoslavia, actually, where I was born, the country that doesn't exist anymore. People say, like, when I talk about it, like I said, like, I changed 4 countries without moving, like basically without changing the place, which speaks about the 90s and the experience growing up in Yugoslavia, and then another Yugoslavia, and then Serbia and Montenegro, and then eventually Serbia. But part of that experience was that we were living in a dictatorship. We had Milosevic, who was a dictator at the time, really kind of like running a civil war in many ways with surrounding neighboring countries, with Croatia and Bosnia and Kosovo. And I was in the medical school at the time, and high school and medical school, and it was quite clear that if we ignore the fact that we live in a dictatorship, there's no way we can be healthy. And it's one of those things where you have, I always talk about it in the context of things that I would say to my parents that I think like they didn't do well. Especially my mom is like, how couldn't you save that country? And that was our story. Like, we need to step up as young people and do something about it. And that's what we did. And that's how I got the bug for activism and community organizing, is realizing that unless you get engaged and get involved to change the trajectory of your community and your society, nobody else is going to do it for you. There will be no kind of like hero coming from outside. And this particular moment, the climate change moment, feels to me now I have an 8-year-old. He's running here in front of my office, and basically I'm thinking like, I cannot do the same. And this time I think it's about the planet. It's not just one country that we need to think about it, save. It's really about kind of like thinking about the whole ecosystem and our planet that we share together. Like, how can we step up and do some of that work? So that's how I see and kind of like think about contributing to this movement, and especially among the people who I think and consider my fellow kind of like clinicians who are on the same journey as we do, to kind of like how do we stop being bystanders and look at the things as just the recipients of the bad news and become actors in that space and actually do something about it. So the practice, if I can share the screen, that would be great. I don't know, like if someone can give me that privilege, I want to share a few slides with you, if that's okay.
I think, Ryan, is it yourself who can allow that?
No, Sarah should be the host. Let's see.
Okay.
Might have to make Pedja the host.
Yeah, or co-host. I think that will work.
Yeah.
Hi, Abigail.
Sarah, I think you're gonna have to do that.
Abigail is joining us from
Hi,
shift.
I'm so sorry. I got pulled in on a shift, so I'm going to be in and out, but listening to the full recording later. Hello,
No worries.
everyone. Pedja, hello. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay. You should have it, Pedja.
I think I do. That's amazing. Let me see. I think this one is going to work. Let's see. Can you see the slides? Okay, that's good. Perfect. So I said like the purpose that I was called in is to talk about relationship building, but relationship building is just one of the community organizing skills. Like, how do you build and grow a community or an organization and a social movement that I believe all of you are building. So let me ask you a question. Like, why do we think we need health equity leaders or climate health leaders to learn community organizing? Like, why do you think that's the case? What are your thoughts? You know, when you think about this, you're coming to this session, and why do you think that's necessary or important? And you can put it in a chat or just speak up, whatever is.
Well, you said it. Nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons. It's kind of like, how do we build a community and how do we work together? Because there will be no like other kind of like relatively easy solution to these things. But I want to also make the case that community organizing is about power and power building. And Martin Luther King defined it as his ability to achieve purpose. When I look at climate change, I don't think we miss or don't have enough technical solutions to some of the problems that we're facing. It's more about why they're not implemented. And when you go down that road and ask the question why they're not implemented, you realize it's because those who have an interest for those things to happen, like, you know, many of us on this call, seeing our patients, seeing our communities and our society being changed by climate change, and seeing the suffering of the world, we have an interest for that to be changed, but we don't have the power to change those things. So it's really about kind of like understanding that these issues are happening because there's a lack of power among those who have an interest to do it. But there's a good thing about power, and that is that power is relational. Power depends on cooperation of people, and that's the thing that I've kind of like learned quite a bit in the movement in the 90s, that we realized that Milosevic could never rule us unless we gave him that opportunity, which means that we are in a relationship, despite the fact that he had all the sources of power, police and military and all of that. We still, as citizens, as young people, as the people, we had the power because we had a relationship, first of all, with each other, but then also their power depended on us. So when you think about community organizing is literally doing that, like is moving people from a place of disorganized, like groups of disorganized, where you can feel, and you probably felt some of these things like apathy, division, drift, reaction, inertia, all of these things, into a space where as a community, as a group of people, you can feel motivation, unity, purpose, initiative, and change. And you were like, oh, that's great. How do we do that? And, you know, there's this magical thing that you can do, which is about leadership, but not any type of leadership that's kind of like really, really important to look into. We're talking about leadership that is about enabling other people to achieve the shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. And there are some practices that we, you know, when we talk about this this definition of leadership, where the focus is not, oh, I'm being diva, I'm projecting myself here, but how do I enable other people? There are certain practices that are quite useful to do that, and relationship building is definitely one of those practices. Like this definition comes from a mentor. His name is Marshall Gantz, and he worked with Cesar Chavez and Chicano movement. And what they've learned is that as in the kind of like farm workers movement in California, is that unless they start depending on each other and building interdependence in relationship with each other, they will never be able to achieve change for their community and changes that they needed to change the position of farm workers in California and across the United States. And it was the same thing in any social movement that you can look at. It always starts with the relationship building. So if that is true, if you work on that under that assumption, let me ask you a question. You're walking down the street and a stranger stops next to you and he offers you a ride or she offers you a ride. How likely is that you will accept this? Because you don't know this person, but they're offering you a ride. Just shout it out or say or whatever.
Probably not highly likely.
Probably not highly like, yeah, we don't know you. Like, I don't know who the hell are you. But then there's a different situation. You walk down the street and a person from your neighbor, like your neighbor, you don't know them that well, but you know that they are your neighbor, stops by, and also they are a firefighter as well, like local firefighter. How likely is that you will accept this in this case?
Pretty likely, because you have many networks that you kind of trust in this situation as a neighbor, somebody who works as a firefighter.
So it's definitely changing the dynamics, because there's someone who is like a firefighter, there's an institution that kind of build trust. There's also like, you know them from the neighborhood. So there's like that kind of like connection and network that is intertwined. And then the last question is, oh, like what about if a friend stopped by and I'll give you a ride? And everybody would say like, yeah, of course I will accept this. This is kind of like a no-brainer, especially because they're going in the same direction and whatnot. So you see how this works. Like when we have a relationship, it's easy to join things. It's easier to join things. And somehow we think that we can ask people to join climate change movement or Black Lives Matter movement or any movement without building a relationship prior to that. Why would you think that will be the case that someone will accept? Like, yeah, they have to be motivated, but they actually don't know you. And we learned that, like, you know, that the best thing to do when it comes to building a movement is to build a relationship of trust first, and then make an ask for people to join, to expand, to grow, and whatever. Because, again, people plus relationships equals power in this case. Because you as a movement, I'm not assuming that you have a lot of money, like, you know, and that you can build your power based on money or organized money. That's one source of power. There's also a source of power where you have like all the institutional power. Maybe that's not the case. You have a little bit of that, but not too much. So lucky, like, you know, most likely you depend on people power, and people power depends on the relationships, and your ability to build them will allow you to invite and get more people involved. So relationships are the glue of this work. So how do they start? Let me ask you a question. If you think about the relationship that you have with someone close, like let's imagine in your head, like someone who is your really good friend, like best friend or a really good friend. How did that started? Go back to the beginning of that relationship. How did that started? Like that initial thing, if you can remember, maybe this is kind of like a memory lane type of thing. But what do you remember? How did that relationship start? Any thoughts?
Common interest and just shared personalities almost. I mean, we thought the same things were funny. We thought the same things were interesting.
Yeah, there was some exchange at the beginning. You know, you think about it, there was some kind of like, oh, we share the same interest. Maybe we can play some sports together, or we can go to a place together, or like, and then through this like exchange of kind of like interest and things. And sometimes it could be like, oh yeah, we were on a carpooling together. Like I was driving a car, that person, like, you know, my best friend, I got in a relationship with him we got in a fight, which is definitely an exchange. But we turned out to be the lifelong kind of friends after that. But what is important is that through that exchange, which is originally exchange, you start to discover people's values. And you kind of like, you start to understand like, okay, what is it that they are bringing into the mix? And then all of a sudden, once you start realizing that, you start realizing, okay, now that we know each other's values, how can we actually make a relationship much more important than just the exchange? We're not exchanging anymore. Relationship becomes far more important. And I will tell you, like, people join organizations maybe for a cause, maybe because but most likely they will stay because they have a relationship with the person. If there is no relationship, it's highly unlikely that under the conditions of stress or any type of danger or any type, people will stay in a movement or in a group, because other things will take priority. It can be the best cause in their life. If other things take over, they will go there. But if they do have a relationship, it's a different dynamics, because they will value that much more than anything else. So that's why investing in building relationships intentionally is actually a critical piece of it. We do it like in organizing, you do it through the practice of one-on-one meetings. Oh, sorry, before we go there. So the one-on-one meetings are basically meetings where you have a conversation and this is like kind of giving you a 5-step how to do something that you already know how to do. So just be mindful with this, that this is not a recipe, it's more like a framework. And in that conversation, you need to start with the attention. Then you are explicitly saying why you're meeting, because you don't want to trick people into a meeting. You will say immediately why you're doing that. And then you go into exploration. And this is a critical piece where you are trying to understand that person.
Pedja, it seems that you cut out. I don't know if you can still hear me, but I'll write in the chat that we lost you for a bit. I guess while we wait for Pedja to rejoin, I think one of the things that I forgot to mention in the beginning when I was introducing him is realizing that just in the world of anything healthcare, medicine, all of the education that we had, at some point in my medical career, I realized that I really don't know anything about the business side of medicine. I never really was taught about how business works. Oh, do I need an MBA? Do I need to know how the finances, all of this work? I think similarly in this realm of community organizing, so much can be done in the realm of healthcare that we really just didn't get much in the world of education in medical school or residency or anything along those lines. So I think something that's really amazing about Pedja's kind of expertise is that it's super applicable to not only the healthcare sustainability community, but everything that VCCA does as a whole. Just a little holding a little bit of that momentum for you, Pedja. Back over to you.
Thank you. Sorry for that. My internet just decided to stop for a second, so I don't know what happened. Right at the point where I was kind of like at the climax of the talk. Okay, so I was talking about what was the last thing that people heard, like about the 5 steps of relationship building, like in one-on-one meetings?
Most important step is exploration.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, most important step is exploration. That's where we want to understand that person's story. And this is where it's something counterintuitive will happen. Like you think about, like, if I tell them about the project, if I spend a lot of time telling them about their organization, our organization, that's going to make a difference. That's how they will join the thing. The reality is that as much as time in that initial relationship building you can spend in understanding their stories, their motive, like one could argue that good one-on-one is like they are talking 80% of the time, you're talking only 20% of the time. And how many times you've been in a meeting where people will tell everything about their organization, everything about their project, and they will not even ask you a question, why do you care? The thing is that we cannot motivate anyone. They can only motivate themselves. And if we give them space to motivate themselves, that will be the best thing to do. So then after that, you will talk about the project, and that's the exchange part. You want to explicitly say, like, this is what we are trying to do, and this is how we are going to do, and all of that. And then you ask for the commitment, because there's no, without a commitment, there's no relationship. Like, you know, if we say, oh, we're going to see each other next time, that's a chit chat. It's not a relationship building. So I want to show you an example, actually, because I think that will be much better in the context of seeing this. This was recorded a couple of years ago. It's a recorded example, so it's a short one for 3 minutes. Usually these meetings are for 20 minutes or half an hour, or like how much time you have. But think about this as just to give you a preview how it could look like, and then we're going to have a little Q&A and discussion about it. So let me start here, because
to draw out our shared commitment from him. So he.
Can people hear this? Like, is the sound okay? Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jeff.
Anjali, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Did you find the coffee shop okay?
Yeah, thank you for the directions.
I'm so glad that Sarah connected us.
Yeah, me too.
You're not from Boston originally.
No, I'm not. I'm from Rockland, New York. It's the suburbs outside the city, and I came to Boston a few years ago for school.
Oh, okay. What's Rockland like?
It's really boring. There's a lot of shopping malls and parking lots, basically.
My hometown is actually Shelton, Connecticut, and sounds very similar. We have the only wiffle ball factory in the world, so it's like our one claim to fame. I'd really like to get to know you a little bit better and tell you about this organization, Boston Educators for Social Justice, that I work with, because I think there might be some interest there. When did you start caring about public education?
I feel like I've really always cared about education for a long time.
So since you were little, since you were young?
Yeah, so both my parents are immigrants, and my mom always told me that they came to this country so that I could get a good education. So she really made me take it seriously.
Yeah, both of my parents are actually immigrants too, from India. Where did your parents immigrate from?
So my dad came from Bulgaria, and my mom was born in Tunisia, and they both met in France, and then I was born in New York.
Yeah, my parents kind of sent a similar message to me. In India, education is really important. I had this one really good teacher in 3rd grade named Mrs. Leadham, who was kind of the one teacher that made me feel really creative and heard. Did you have good teachers in your school experience?
There are a few that stand out. One for me is definitely Mr. Alexander in 8th grade, who taught English and always affirmed my writing. He was really cool, and he was just a really fun teacher too.
Sarah told me you got interested in education when you were in Philly, but it sounds like you had a good experience. When did you get interested?
They closed 24 public schools in Philly a few years ago when I was there, because they said that there wasn't enough money for public education in the city. And I volunteered for a community organization and actually got to know a lot of public school students, and they would tell me that in their schools they didn't even have enough books, they didn't have nurses or guidance counselors because of all the budget cuts. So I was like, wow, how is that possible that, you know, I went to good public schools where we had everything we needed, and yet these students in Philly didn't have access to the most basic things.
I'm wondering why it mattered to you so much what was going on in Philly, if your own experience was a good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, like I said, I think it really comes from what my mom used to teach me. Education is really important. Everybody should be able to have access to a good education. So I think it's not fair that some people get to have it and a lot of people don't.
I've actually gotten involved with Boston Educators for Social Justice because they're doing a lot of the work, like it sounds what was happening in Philly, trying to really get students the support that they need. So we actually are having this big training for our group on Friday, November 10th at 6 p.m. I think it sounds like it's something you would really enjoy, Jeff. Do you think you'd be able to make it that Friday?
Okay, let's stop here for a second. So what did you observe? Like this is a typical one-on-one meeting, except that goes longer, and you know, there's like, this is obviously staged and kind of like they're having conversation. But what did you observe that was different than the usual kind of like professional conversation, if you want to put it that way? Like, she was also running an organization about the education. You know, Jeff was kind of like remotely interested in that. And what was he doing in order to get him engaged?
The core of it was the personal interaction. like establishing a personal contact with the fellow to bring him in and engage.
Joel, how was she doing that? Like, what did you observe? Like, what was she doing to enable that?
Well, she was asking very pointed questions about his past, his interests, you know, really bringing him into the conversation, not talking at him, but really talking with him and pulling him into the conversation.
Yeah. Anyone had ideas like why was that working? Like, what was working about it? Like, you know,
Part of it was she kept bringing values into it, and values are a lot more engaging than, you know, how'd you find the coffee shop?
exactly. It's kind of like, you know, you start asking questions about values, but then how do you uncover values? Because people can say their values, but you know, it's one thing to say, oh, I care about this. The other thing is to uncover it, like somehow. Like, what did you observe? How did she uncover the values?
One of the ways is when she asked about his experiences with teachers, and when he talks about what kind of teachers he liked. That, you know, if he said, I really love this person who slapped us around all day, that's a very different value than I love somebody who encouraged us and so forth.
Interesting. So the values are revealed through stories usually. So when you have a one-on-one with people, you want to kind of like try to see how you can elicit the stories where those values were practiced. You know, it's not just like, oh, I care about this. It's like, oh, when did you learn to care about that? Like, well, how did that happen? Like, so it's kind of like requires a genuine curiosity to actually kind of like explore what is this person about? Where are they coming? And, you know, one thing that people kind of like usually have as a problem with this is that they will think about this as an interview. Well, then we go into, oh yeah, I can take a good check on you, and you know, as clinicians we know how to do that, but there's a danger there. So how did she avoid interrogating him and having more a conversation? Like, what did you observe about what she did in the conversation with him? And I hope I'm not kind of like frozen again. I don't know. Maybe I am. I'm back, I guess. I hope so. How did she observe that? Like, how did she do that? Like to avoid the interviewing or interrogation type of thing?
So she was sharing some of her personal information as well. So this way there was a back and forth. It wasn't just her pounding him with questions. She was relating to his stories.
Exactly. So it's really about, and that's where you start building a relationship based on values. Like, you hear someone telling you a story, so they basically expose themselves, and then you think about what in my experience resembles that. And they're like, we are human beings. We have a lot of experiences that are similar. And this is not to trick them into something. It's just to show that you're listening, and then that you actually share some of that experience. Sometimes that will not be the case. And through the one-on-one conversation, you can discover, oh, I don't know, I don't want to have to do anything with this person. Let's move on. But sometimes it will be extremely useful to share pieces of your story to kind of like deepen the connection and the relationship. So let me stop here for a second. And you can see this practice. This, I know you're gonna do this. This is something that is the best way to actually scale your movement. And it feels like, oh, this is so daunting because we have to do it one person at a time. But the way it usually goes in the movement is like, you start with the initial conversation, and then your ask is for that person to maybe host a small meeting where that person can invite 2 or 3 other people to have a conversation about this. So you're immediately building a relationship, but you're also testing their leadership. And that's how you can grow extremely fast, because you can scale over a period of time quite a bit without having to lose the touch of kind of like connection and relationship building, and not just mobilize people to be on the list, which is usually a problem. But let me stop there and open for a little bit of questions and a conversation about this practice and about this work, and any other questions that you might have. And I know you have some discussions to have tonight as well.
I wanted to thank you for a refresher of 1977 when the Army in its wisdom decided to make me a re-enlistment NCO.
Yeah.
And the phrase we used was that we had an objective. I want to keep you. I got numbers to meet, okay?
Yeah.
And I know this package. I looked at your service record, but the word we used then was steering questions.
Uh-huh.
You give me a piece, and I keep steering on the path. We may go to the right, we may go to the left, but keep to the center and keep steering when you give me a response. Well, I look at my objective, and then I steer you toward that objective till I close the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is when I turned the paper around and had you sign the initial paperwork.
Yeah.
But
you have to be careful. Let me just, Raymond, I do think that there's a lot of resembling with the sales. The difference is that you are in this case, you're getting in sales, you're getting commitment from another person. In relationship building, you're committing yourself as well. And that is a huge difference. So you have to think about that as like, yeah, there's some resemblance, but there's also a danger. If you just want them to commit, people will see through that. And they will say like, oh yeah, you just want me to do, but you're not willing to commit yourself to it. So that's a slight difference because it requires your commitment as well in order to grow it, like to become something bigger.
Indeed, because in that sales, one of the steering things for both the person I'm selling to and me is the common values. Mm-hmm. And I'll skip the many years of quoting that stuff. But now to jump to something else. In the whole model from moving from disorganized to organized, there's one thing that, and I brought this up a couple of different times in the meetings, is I'm gonna, no offense to Bon Secours, I'm just going to use them as an example because I was down Hampton Ways exploring the different campuses. But Bon Secours, originally its hub was Richmond, Virginia, and scattered throughout Richmond. And then it starts spreading, and it spread all the way Norfolk and there. But now the Sisters of Bon Secours, they're under the Mercy Health System that's based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we have disorganization in the sense that each one of these different campuses almost become little entities within themselves. And we could say, well, my wife works for Riverside Health System. Oh, we could sell it to the mothership in Newport News, but is that going to get picked up all the way out to the Eastern Shore and along the peninsula? So that's kind of another aspect of the disorganized to move toward organized.
Yeah, like that. What other thoughts people have, like, about that or the questions? Thank you, Raymond, for that. Like, that was great.
Pedja, a very kind of basic question. When it gets to this space of like most of us have meetings via Zoom, most of us meeting via camera. What are your thoughts about the initial ask of how to present a meeting, half an hour or so via internet, if that's really the only option that you have? And then what are your thoughts on some of the barriers that happen in this particular form of communication, whether or not the masses have come to terms with communicating via Zoom or Google or any of these platforms?
Yeah, look, I think you can build relationships in many ways. I think, it used to be the phone. Like when we were organizing in Serbia, it was like you didn't even have the internet, but now we can at least see each other. Like it was just like you pick up the phone and you talk to someone and eventually you meet, and then it becomes almost like even bigger because, like I worked with Marshall, for example, for 2 years from Serbia. Like he was kind enough. He was a professor at Harvard that I wrote him a letter, and he was kind enough to start working with us. And when I saw him for the first time after 2.5 years, he said, "You are so tall," because I'm 6'3", And I looked at him and he's not. I said like, and you are not. But it became this special thing. So the point is that you can build relationships even through the Zoom meetings, like or through the phone or to any way that people can communicate. I'm personally struggling with the text messages, like how do you do that? It's kind of harder. But I think it's more about what questions and what conversations we'll engage. Are we going to stay on the level of surface level, or are we going to go a little bit deeper and ask the questions about what really motivates us and what is? And it's hard with clinicians. What I've seen is that we are trained not to tell our stories. It really drives me crazy because it's kind of like our medical school and nursing schools, and they're telling us not put yourself into the mix because it's your patients, it's your community, and I respect that. I think it makes sense in medicine. It doesn't make sense in public life, in political life, because people want to know where are we coming from as well. So it's kind of like harder always to get that story from people because we are trained not to tell the story, or people will give you the spiel of their patients and whatnot. But it's worth digging. In my experience, it's worth digging and asking, well, that's interesting, but why did you do that? And then once people go through that, they will find it amazingly refreshing and recovering if they start kind of like, oh, this person actually asked me about me in this context, and why do I care about these things? And that can be done, to answer your question, I think it can be done through Zoom as well, or any other form of communication, except the text. I don't know. That's the new generation. I like that's too much.
It's funny because as you said that, excuse me, it made me think like actually, but this type of conversation is more familiar to me as a way to talk to a patient, but not to include my own
that's exactly right.
Own narrative in there too, feels kind of vulnerable.
Yeah, people sometimes listen to this and they say, oh, this is like motivational interviewing, and I say yes, except that you have to tell your own story as well. It's not just their story or kind of like their ambivalence or whatever. Sorry, Joanne, I think you wanted to say something, so I didn't want to.
Yeah, I have a question and a statement. So, in the setting that some of us are, this is obviously around healthcare sustainability.
Yeah.
A lot of the examples you brought up are these one-on-ones. And so, grassroots kind of thing. And so having the conversation with my bedside nurses or going to units to kind of get more people within the hospital engaged in it. Yeah. My question revolves around, do you have any advice when you're in front of your executive leadership team? So you're not in that one-on-one setting, but you have to get them engaged and you have to get the buy-in, and you don't have the opportunity to kind of have this one-on-one. So when you're in a group and there's 10 people you need to present to and get them captive, it seems like a different strategy, or can you advise?
Yeah, I agree. It's a completely different strategy. It's not like the only thing that you can learn and take from this practice of doing the one-on-one is your own story. Like we teach in the Climate Health Organizing Fellowship and some of the Samim and Sarah, like we start with how do you tell your story? Because what is really interesting in those spaces where you have kind of like executives or bringing in your personal story can be another kind of like a really kind of, oh, this is really different than usual stuff. And let me tell you, when I first learned the public narrative, which is a skill of kind of like storytelling, specific way of storytelling to engage people into action, Marshall taught us that. And I had a meeting with 52 hospital CEOs in Serbia. And I was like, he said like, well, you should tell the story, because we were doing some anti-corruption work, and we wanted to get engaged, to get supportive, to kind of like for the new ethical code. I was afraid like hell. Like, I was just like, oh, I need to stand in front of the 52 like top level executives and tell them my story about why do I care about it? Like, are you kidding me? They want to learn about the project. And then he convinced me, he's like, give it a try. I've shared my story. Not that I've got their commitment. I've got a standing ovation, and they said like, look, this is why we care about these things as well. But we are always nobody ever tell that through the experience, because the problem was that in Serbia, corruption was such that a small group of people were corrupted, but the bigger group was just not corrupted, and their experience was like being labeled as corrupted. And I've told that story kind of like in my own language, from my own experience. Why did I join medicine, and how is this not helping? And people were blown away just because they were given permission to do something that nobody else, had the courage to give them. So I would suggest, I know it feels like counterintuitive. Oh, they want to learn everything about the project. Yes, they want to learn that. But they also want to learn about you, because they want to understand, is this person someone I can trust and that has the values that are aligned with whatever the values are? And you will have time to tell the project. That's I don't want to undermine that as well and make the business case and all of that. That's really important. But engaging that heart piece, if you want to put it that way, is equally important. So when I think about that, I would probably suggest like thinking about your own story and sharing that as part of your conversation would be probably a good idea how to approach these meetings. I don't know. Is this helpful? Like, I hope it is. It's scary though. Like, I have to tell you.
No, it is. I think I just got to get my leadership to give me more than 10 minutes to present, but that's for a whole nother meeting.
Yeah. Look, I know you guys want to talk about something, so I don't want to. I just wanted to share one thing before I go, if that's okay. We are doing my organization, People Power Health. We are doing every fall and spring, but this fall is coming up. We have a training, like a 6-week-long training on basic skills on activism and community organizing. It's free for anyone who is interested in joining. I will share information with Sarah and Samim and others. And if anybody is interested to join us this fall, you're more than welcome to, if you want to learn more of these skills. We cover all the 5 skills of moving from this organization to an organization, including the relationship building. There's a lot of practicing and stuff like that. So if people are interested, I want to extend the invitation to this amazing group of lovely people and committed people in this case. So.
Yeah, Pedja, let me just say, through all of our meetings, in the back of my mind is always, well, what are the next steps? How do we grow the movement, if you will? And your experience and your enthusiasm and your talk is just an enlightenment to kind of help spur, at least in my mind, next steps and what have you. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks again, Pedja. Please do send that info on the fall and spring class. We can definitely share it with our colleagues. We've had some experience of a couple of us separating out and doing a class and bringing that information back to the larger group. So that's a really good model.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you all. It was great seeing you all.
Thank you so much, Pedja. So great to see you.
Bye.